From the Alvin and Rosalie Sarachek studio, PBS Kansas presents Kansas Week.
From banned books to threatened personnel, one Kansas library's decision to go dark on social media. Plus, could some Wichtons find themselves with no shelter for the winter, not even in an emergency? But first, a 5-year-old girl raped and killed, renewing questions about the Department of Children and Family. That's what we're talking about right now on Kansas Week. This is Kansas Week, and I'm your host, Pilar Pedraza. State lawmakers are getting involved in demanding answers this week after the rape and murder of a 5-year-old Topeka girl. Rebecca Chung with the KSN Capitol Bureau takes a look at what they're saying.
New video of Zoe Felix, a vibrant 5-year-old who used to wander this Topeka neighborhood. A neighbor provided the video to us and says that Zoe was like family.
It's like, hey mom, you know, well, hey baby, what's going on? You know, she was just the sunshine in the rain, really.
Shaniqua Bradley says Zoe used to come over to her house often, asking for food, water, and just to play with other neighborhood kids.
We would clean her up and, comb her hair or, whatever needed to be done.
Neighbors say Zoe's mother kicked her out of their home, along with Zoe's teenage sister and father. The group was living in a homeless camp where she was raped and murdered.
Zoe did not deserve to be in anybody's woods. This is her home right here. She has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people that would do anything for her.
Investigators say the man arrested, Michael Cherry, knew the 5-year-old, but as of Wednesday afternoon did not disclose the details of that relationship. Meanwhile, neighbors are speaking out about the time leading up to Zoe's death, including what they say were countless complaints to DCF. In the weeks leading up to her death, they say there was no running water in Zoe's home and that she would often roam the neighborhood streets unsupervised.
It was always a, can I stay, can I stay, can I stay? Normally when a kid is persistent about staying like that, something's wrong at home.
I just reported, the neglect that was going on. She's always dirty. No food unless some of us fed her. She was always eating candy, just those kind of things, but they didn't obviously take it serious.
Kansas lawmakers are also frustrated. They say the Department of Children and Families needs to do more.
We have to do more. This is unacceptable.
We really need a deep dive on why is the system failing.
Child welfare leaders say they're not able to comment publicly on the issue, entering a closed meeting with lawmakers Wednesday.
I actually do not have the legal ability to say anything in a public setting until certain additional things happen related to making a finding of abuse or neglect.
And right now, the governor is not commenting on this situation. I also saw the mother outside her home this morning. She's also not speaking tonight. But an investigation is underway, and we've also sent in an open records request to get more details on what actions DCF did and didn't take in this situation and what led up to Zoe's death. For now, reporting at the Capitol, I'm Rebecca Chung.
And Thursday, prosecutors charged Michael Cherry with capital murder, or in the alternative, first-degree murder in the commission of a dangerous felony, as well as rape of a child under the age of 14. A tough and angering note to begin on with our panelists today. Those include Diane Leffler, opinion editor with the Wichita Eagle, and State Representative Susan Oliver Estes, a Wichita Republican. We did have a Democrat on the docket. She got stuck in a meeting and could not join us. This is tough, and we were talking about this before the show, Susan, and you were talking about how frustrating this is. This is not the first case like this that we've dealt with.
And unfortunately, this is one in a sequence, and I think we keep trying to learn lessons from the past ones. We passed Adrian's Law. We're supposed to make sure that we get our eyes on the child in the story, in the complaint, and make sure that we're there, that we know what's going on. And even though that law helps to get us one step closer to where we need to be, we're still short of where we need to be. So for me, this newest incident says we have more questions to ask. We have a law to refine. I have just a huge long list of questions in my head. Do we need to have a conversation that it is now child endangerment to take a child to live in a homeless encampment? All of those kinds of things. What can we do to be proactive? what is happening in the decision-making matrix of DCF that they're not able to get to these families? What different types of tactics do we need to ask them to take? I did some research today and I discovered that the Union Rescue Mission in Topeka would have taken this dad and Zoe and her sister and kept them together as a unit when her mother kicked them out of the house. Why aren't we seeing more people take advantage of that opportunity? What are the cultural barriers? What are the fears that people have? We've got to get to the bottom of this.
Or even just the basic informational barriers. Did they even know that that option existed? And Diane, you and I, of course, have been on the other side of this. We've covered these tragedies time and time again. And the one thing we keep running into is the lack of ability to get information out of DCF. Of course, they have to balance transparency with rights of the child to privacy, but it seems like it is still tilted too far toward privacy.
Well, yeah, and I mean, how many, you know, like you said, we've done case after case after case of this, and you can never get any information. In fact, even legislators can't get the information that they need to do their job, and something's got to change. It's just too closed, and whenever a system is that closed, you're not gonna, you know, it's just not gonna work.
Now, I know that I get a lot of emails from Kansans who are upset because they know a child in danger who is not being taken in, and they say that it's because the child is too old, they're not adoptable. The private foster care companies in the state won't handle them. Is that a fair assessment? Is it time, perhaps, to look at the ups and downs of privatization versus public handling of it?
I think all conversations are on the table, but I hate to hear an excuse of, well, we're going to leave them there because we won't have another place to put them. That is not in a child's best interest, and our number one mission in this situation is a child's best interest. And I think in the pursuit of that, we've tried this way, we've tried that way, and we haven't gotten to the right way. And by that I mean, at one point we talked about too many children being removed, and I get a number of emails from families who say, our child really shouldn't have been removed.
Yeah.
You dig into them and you kind of find out that some of them are wrong and some of them have a point. Now we have DCF coming and testifying in Topeka saying, oh, look, we are reducing the number of children that we have in custody. And part of that is a good thing because they are doing more on the front end to try to prevent situations and help families early on, and that's a good thing. But the bad part of that is we might really be looking at leaving children where they don't belong because we're worried about that statistic. So what it's come down to for me is, I think we're trying to measure the wrong thing. We have how many kids we do put in custody or how many children we don't take custody of. And maybe the measurement needs to be, how many times did DCF get it right? Because there is a time that you need to take children, and there are many times that you try to work with a family, but getting it right and understanding what matrix they're looking at as they make their decisions is important to me. And that's one of those things, Diane, that you're right, we don't get to look at. Because we all know that when a teacher or a medical professional or law enforcement reports, those reports get responded to very quickly. And clearly we have a situation where we had a large number of neighbors who were talking about what was going on. And maybe that large number of neighbors needs to also be a trigger and move something up because they are there, they are seeing it.
Well, one thing too, you know, when I think, you know, there has to be somebody in this country who's doing this better than we are. We need to find out who that is and then do what they do. You know, I mean, I've watched, I don't know how many legislative hearings on this stuff, and it's always, you know, well, you know, maybe we should do it this way, maybe we should do it that way. But the one thing I've never heard is, these people are doing it better than us, so let's do that. You know, I mean, it just, and you know, in cases where there's a death, perhaps protecting the privacy of the dead person is not the biggest is not the biggest priority. I mean, maybe we need to, to be able to look at some of those cases and see what went wrong.
Diane, I agree with you. We can't fix it if we don't know what the problem really is. And it's a tough conversation because a lot of people have to be willing to come forward and say, here's what we did right and here's what we did wrong. Face the liability so that the public trusts us. And right now, the public does not trust us. And I put myself in the father's shoes earlier. If you know that DCF is coming to your home, you instantly get into a place where you fear having your children be taken away. So you do go hide somewhere and you're not getting help. And when you get into the homeless camps, people are being preyed upon there, and that is the worst place. So not only what do we do differently, but I think we also need to figure out how do we build the trust so that people are willing to come and not look at DCF as the enemy, or we connect them with someone who's completely different, some kind of a social worker, and say, here's the alternatives for the situations that you're in. And by the way, we're not here to take away your children. If you don't treat your children well, you may force us to do something. But we are trying to help you, and do not, just get people to come in and talk and help. I think at the end of the day, I tend to be very positive on what I think people want to do. Of course, there's a reality that not everybody is that way, but we have a lot of fear and a lot of trust, and that's part of solving the problem.
And we're going to have to leave that discussion there. We've got other things to talk about. One of Wichita's biggest homeless organizations says it's not going to open a winter shelter this year. So what's next for Wichita's unhoused needing shelter from the elements? KAKE's Jackson Overstreet takes a look.
Inside this old church building for 5 months a year is a refuge for the homeless community in Wichita. It is the home of Humankind Ministries' emergency winter shelter, but for the first time in 17 years, it will not be active. In a statement provided to KAKE News, the nonprofit says, quote, as the number of those seeking emergency winter shelter has continued to climb, Humankind's facility capacity is being stretched. Humankind shared with partners that they would be challenged to operate an emergency winter shelter this year.
For too long, I think the city of Wichita, we've left it up to the nonprofits to really provide care for those who are facing homelessness or those who are chronically unhoused.
Mayor Brandon Whipple says the city and Sedgwick County are working with Humankind and other organizations on a new temporary shelter option. A lot of the details are still being worked out, but he says it will be ready in time for this winter.
We're too good of a city to let people freeze to death.
Humankind Shelter is typically open overnight from November to March and served 463 different people last winter. County Commissioner Ryan Beatty called the closure a crisis situation, saying, quote, it's simply not acceptable to have no 24/7 low barrier option available for the winter months. He told KAKE News via email that the goal is for this temporary shelter to meet or exceed the capacity of what was closed. Whipple echoed those plans on Thursday.
I believe Humankind's capacity is about 300 maybe, but they've never had more than around 200-ish. So my understanding is that's the goal that we're aiming for the number.
And it's getting cold. We all walked in going, this is colder than we were expecting today. This is a big deal. Now the city doesn't have anything in place yet.
No, they don't. And Mayor Whipple was absolutely right. We cannot farm this out to nonprofits and expect them to pick up what is essentially a government responsibility. There's just not the resources there to do this and do it right. And the other problem is that this was a low barrier or even no barrier shelter, because many of our unhoused population have problems with drugs, they have problems with mental illness, and we're just not geared, nonprofits are not really geared to be able to deal with all those problems. So I think the city and the county are going to have to step in and take care of this.
And talking about the mental health aspect, that's certainly something that's come up a lot at the state level, and trying to provide more mental health services, because we know that is feeding into not just the homelessness problem, but also the drug problems that we're seeing.
You're 100% correct about that, and I'd like to start by complimenting the city and the county for working together on this, and I see people from both parties leading the effort here, and I wish Councilwoman Ballard was here because I know she's been a strong voice, and as well as Commissioner Beatty, and that's what it takes. We have to kind of say, all right, let's get certain things out of the way and let's look at the real problem and let's look at what drives them, and let's look at where we all play a part of the solution. And I have taken tours of Humankind, and the rate that mental illness impacts what we're seeing is very high, and we just seem to be at a place where we're really struggling with that, and families are struggling with it in order to get their family ones helped. So I think it's a large problem. There's a lot of different aspects of it that need work, and it's an area that you've seen the legislature prioritize. It's when we've been our best and we've gotten both parties to work together to say, let's get some things that are working for mental health over here and get them going. And I think our mental health hotline is a good thing, but it's a larger problem, and there's other things that we haven't even begun to talk about. We haven't figured out a way for families to get help for family members, because we try to work so hard to make sure that we don't infringe on someone's rights, that we don't help someone when they need it and we know they need it. But I know many people who've gone into a medical situation and said, we have a mental health issue, and when a doctor turns around and asks, are you going to hurt yourself or someone else, the answer is always no, and at that point a family is very limited. And that's, for me, a question. I've spent a lot of time trying to figure out what's our right solution there that balances individual freedom to address that, and also empowers the family to get that care for their family member, because it's just a huge component and the underlying issue for everything right now.
All right. Well, you won't find the Andover Library anywhere on social media right now, and it all has to do with books the library carries that some see as controversial. KAKE's Abby Ray explains.
We're not trying to push a political or religious agenda. Access is what we're about.
The Andover Public Library has found itself at the center of a banned book controversy as it tried to celebrate Banned Book Week.
Libraries across the United States and Canada sort of celebrate and highlight books that have been banned or removed from other libraries.
Andover was showcasing images of banned books on Facebook. The first day, Captain Underpants, and the second day, Genderqueer.
And when I got here Wednesday morning, each of those pictures had over 1,000 comments on them.
The comments? Mostly negative, ranging from name-calling to threats against the books themselves. Multiple people sent images of wood chippers to the library, or said they'd like to burn the books, or check them out with no plans to return. The library's solution? To stop posting and disable all the comments.
It made me sad to have to do it. Felt like we were, giving in to negativity. But I also felt somewhat relief because staff were being stressed out and worried about their safety.
The book that seemed to draw in the most controversy was Genderqueer, which is the most banned book in the United States.
The book features a young person's story about gender dysphoria, not being comfortable with the body they're in, and their transformation.
I'm a queer person, and as a queer person, I've read books that gave me so much perspective and helped me through that.
The library says diversity and inclusion is very important to its core values and mission, to provide access to information to all.
Public libraries for everyone in the community, not just the dominant group.
And one thing that Abby was saying after she spoke with that librarian is that this book was not in the juvenile section. It was in the adult section of the library because there are concerns. Some parents don't want their kids reading that. And, the library is trying to make sure that parents can have what they have to say. But we have this public reaction to certain topics, this one being, gender politics, we'll call it, being one of them, that just seems to bring out the hatred so much. You and I certainly see it in news.
Well, yeah, and this is infuriating, frankly. you know, this, I mean, frankly, if somebody sends a threatening message to a library, then they ought to be tracked down, and they ought to get a visit from the KBI if they're in state, and the FBI if they're out of state. Because this is just intolerable. You know, it just, you know, I've been spending time out in Sterling with the Book Ban of the Month Club out there, also known as the Library Board. And it's, you know, that if you don't want to read a book, don't read it. But what gives you the right to say what I can read or what Susan can read? You know, I mean, it's incredibly frustrating. And frankly, this is how Nazi Germany got started. And you know, this is everybody's fight.
And I know, Susan, you used to work with libraries. What's your perspective on all this?
Well, I was blessed to serve the Wichita Public Library Board's board, and at one time as president. And I want to first react to the threats. We are a civil society, and yes, threats are horrible and they shouldn't happen. But they are coming at us from everywhere. You'd be surprised at what you see in my inbox as well. And I think as public-facing people,
you'd be surprised what you see in mine.
You and I, we're both getting them, and I get them from the left, and I get them from the right. And we are a civil country, and threats and intimidation have no place. And no matter who it's coming from, I flat out condemn it. Now, I will also say, as a legislator, I feel like one of the things that we are in the legislature is everybody's complaint department, because people who do want to live in a civil society and find a good resolution to issues come to us and they say, this is what I'm experiencing, and it can range from a wide range of things. But one of the topics that I have gotten is when parents feel like there are completely inappropriate books for their children's age in their libraries. And we need to figure out how we can discuss this constructively. I've been shown some of the books that some of the parents are upset with, and I can understand why they want to have a voice of what their child reads and what's in front of them. But we have to use our words and solve it well.
Well, yeah, and you know, I have no problem with, you know, making libraries, you know, if a parent doesn't want their child to read a book, I have no problem with putting them on a list that says this child cannot check out this book. It seems like a very simple thing to solve without taking away everybody else's right. What some parent might want their children to read might not be what I would allow my children to read.
And I think I agree with you, and what you're describing is very similar to a parent's bill that I carried this year that got overridden. And I think it was a common sense solution. Nobody wants to ban books, but I think parents get a right to participate and make decisions about their children. I was an active parent because I was a teacher, and when there were certain assignments that my children brought home, I had feelings about them, and I respectfully went to the teachers at my child's school and said, here's where I'm coming from on this. And one of them was about personal questions on the census, and I showed the teacher the Constitution and said, here's the leeway that the Constitution allows. And she actually took that in good spirit and said, thank you, because now we're going to have a discussion about that. Not all parents have had that kind of an experience, and we have had parents who come to us and say, I'm told I don't get to make that decision, that academic freedom trumps me as a parent. But I think we need to get to the common sense.
All right, we're going to leave that one there. It's the search warrant that was seen around the world as police raided the Marion County Record. 6 weeks later, the chief has resigned and the city is trying to pick up the pieces. Kate's Nick Nelson explains.
Less than 24 hours after Marion City Council members voted him in as the interim police chief,
Chief Cody, that he is resigning his position as chief of police immediately.
Zach Hudlin says he wants to take the department in a new direction.
We can do better than we have done. We can be better than we were, so we just got to prove it.
The only question is how to do that. Hudlin and the rest of the Marion Police Department are facing a lot of criticism from the rest of the world after the department raided the Marion County Record's newsroom in August.
It's going to be stressful, but we just have to change that public perception. We just have to move on from where we were and grow and expand past that.
Eric Meyer, editor of the Marion County Record, says he thinks Hudlin taking on this job is a step in the right direction.
Zach's a nice guy. I've always liked Zach. And even while Chief Cody was here, he was trying to convince Chief Cody to restore some things that the department used to provide for us.
And Hudlin is wasting no time, taking steps immediately to be more open to the community and media about what the department is doing.
As I was walking out of the council meeting last night, the first thing I did was I talked to Eric and told him that, and asked for the email where we're going to send our weekly activity report.
While Meyer says Zach is a good guy, he does have one concern. Hudlin is the one who found the reporter's file on former Chief Cody and showed it to him. However, Meyer says he thinks Hudlin likely did that because Cody was his boss at the time and he wanted to make him happy.
I don't think it was malicious, I guess.
Hudlin is facing another challenge. The police department is extremely short-staffed with only 3 officers, and him acting as chief means there are now only 2 patrol officers.
In a struggle, we're not going to be able to get the coverage we would like. We're not going to be able to get everything done we would like to.
As of now, there is no timeline on when the city's next official police chief will start or any idea on who it will be.
And I'm sorry, Nick did not go through a gender change there. That was Jocelyn Schifferdecker reporting. Diane, I'm going to kind of end this with you here. I don't know about you, but I had trouble keeping up with all of the new developments coming out of Marion this week.
Oh yeah, my reaction was, it's about time. We've been dealing with this, basically Chinese wall that, on everything. And the first day that, the day after this happened, I wrote an opinion piece saying this guy needs to be fired. And so I'm glad he's gone. But when you're measuring progress by, okay, now they're letting us have the police blotter again, which is purely public information, there's still a long way to go.
No. All right. Well, that's it for today. Thank you both so much for joining us, Diane and Susan. We'd love to thank you as well as our news partners at the Wichita Eagle, KSN News, and Cake News for sharing their materials with us. We can continue this conversation with you online. Just look for Pilar Pedraza TV or PBS Kansas. We're on most social media platforms. For now, stay safe and have a great week.